Well, hello from the Aviva Stadium. So a first win for Ireland in this Six Nations. They held on to beat Italy 20 points to 13. Ireland were 5-10 down at half-time. Jack Conan and Robert Balakoon got second half tries, but no 4-try bonus point in a crazy end game. Ruaidhri O'Connor and Cian Tracey are here. Lads, you got some pizza there?
We did. One of the Italian journalists just landed in with like some Italian
Don't
pizza.
usually get that.
It was
highlight of the day, without a shadow of a doubt.
It's the main takeaway from the whole thing, pardon the pun.
Okay, well, firstly, a reminder that our rugby coverage on Indo Sport is sponsored by Energia, who sponsor the game at all levels in Ireland. To learn more about the rugby partnerships and exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, go to energia.ie/rugby. It was all about the response, Rory. Okay, let's move on from Pizzagate.
You want good pizza though.
I need to get myself some of that. Okay, on the scale of response, where did that come for you?
Very in keeping with this Ireland team and where they're at in 2026. I think I said last week in Paris that it's whack-a-mole for Andy Farrell at the moment. He got his intent, he got his aerial wins, some of the ground stuff was very good at the start, but they were playing in all the wrong areas. They started making mistakes, the scrum went to pieces, and they ended up in an arm wrestle with an Italian team that are rapidly improving, but one that they beat 36-0 here 2 years ago. And Italy have been on an upward graph since that game in 2024, and Ireland have been on a downward graph. He got some real change out of the changes that he made. Yeah. Some didn't work as well. I think the out half discussion is right back in the mixer again on the back of a poor performance for Sam Prendergast. I didn't think Craig Casey took his chance at all, but there were a number of players who played really, really well, and there was also a lot of fight, and like they managed to win a game that they arguably shouldn't have won. Now that's partly down to Italy leaving chances behind, but they did come out on the right side of it. They are back to winning ways, and maybe in time we'll look back on this as some sort of turning point, but right now it didn't feel like a particularly satisfying win, albeit there was good scenes at the end among the crowd, and there's new players and there's good and bad to take from it. But look, they've become a mid-table team. It was a mid-table performance against another mid-table team, and they kind of roll on from here, not really knowing where they're at.
Yeah, I think we should give Italy a lot of credit. I think they will leave here this evening gutted that they didn't get a huge missed opportunity from Italian point of view. I think back to Menincello's forward pass to Louis Lina for the chalked off try. I think back to Menincello's knock on underneath the posts. Like, Ireland got out of jail here big time today, and I think, as I said, when Italy are the ones leaving, they'll be the ones who'd feel like that was a chance for us to get a history-making win, and then if that had happened, we'd be having a very different discussion now. So I think that's important in terms of how we're going to frame this discussion that we're about to have. Like you asked Rod there, Sinead, where was it on the level of response? Like, overall, I don't think we could say that was the response that Andy Farrell was hoping for. I agree with what you said, Rod. I think he did get a response from certain players who came in, but I still thought a lot of the big players just didn't really deliver, particularly across the 80 minutes. Obviously we can get on and talk about that, some of whom actually were taken off early. I think that is still a concern. Again, it was the guys a bit like the bench last week who came on, albeit some of them were experienced. I thought the bench again today was very good. You mentioned Jack Crowley. Obviously we'll get on and talk about that a little bit more, but I thought Tom O'Toole did very well when he came on off the bench at loosehead to help lock out the scrum. I know a lot of the penalties were coming on the tight head side, but someone who knows a lot more about scrummaging just said to me that was due to the pressure that was coming on the loose head side, and I thought it was telling when Tom O'Toole came on, and fair play to him because he hasn't got a lot of experience at this level on the loose head side. But what a feather in the cap for Italy to have caused the Irish scrum so many problems. And I thought Edwin Adogbo as well, I was surprised that he only got on for 10 minutes at the end, because I think you could see the power in the scrum, particularly under the post, that he helped provide on the tight head side of the second row behind Tadhg Furlong. So I was a bit surprised maybe he didn't come on for longer. I know he gave away a penalty at the end.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that penalty anyway. Yeah,
but I thought, just to round off, I thought the bench was very good. Nick Timoney again was excellent, made a crunching tackle in the corner and that big defensive stand that Ireland have. So when I come away from Sinead, I'm kind of thinking like how much of Ireland actually moved on from last week in terms of Paris. Yes, they got the win, but I still think there's an awful lot of questions hanging over this team.
I mean, it was just a crazy end game. I mean, you mentioned that scrum there, and they did well with that scrum, and then Ireland were just defending for their lives, and then James Lowe gets the intercept, Ireland get a penalty, and then at the end, I actually couldn't believe it.
Yeah, Jack Rowley was exceptional when he came into the game and changed the game and arguably won the game for Ireland. So we are starting on his one negative, I think probably the only negative of his performance, but he Billy Burns that, like, you know, it's gone down, and like, you know, Farrell, Billy Burns will be forever remembered as the guy who kicked the ball out when Ireland had the game in the balance against Wales in Cardiff. What was that, 2020? 21.
The last time they lost their two opening games.
It just kind of summed up the day. Like, I wouldn't necessarily look, this is probably the problem with the Ireland's both of Ireland's 10s at the moment, is that they do good things and then they follow them up with a bad. It's almost emblematic of the team, who seem to be incapable of backing up good moments with more good moments. Even like Balakoon gets up and wins a kickoff, and Jeremy Loughman knocks it on. In Paris, they won 3 or 4 turnovers and knocked on at the next phase. And James Lowe, the crowd is on their feet. James Lowe has made this big lung busting break. I think Timoney carried it on. Italy conceded a penalty, and you know, they don't deserve a bonus point, but a bonus point suddenly makes the title, as bizarre as this sounds, it makes it a possibility, or at least it could be the difference between finishing second and third, which I think is 1.5 million in prize money for the IRFU. And I'm sorry, but you have to nail that. Just like Sam Prendergast has to nail his conversions in the first half and make some of the tackles that he missed. And unfortunately, I think the muddled picture at number 10 is continuing to haunt Ireland. It's not the only issue with this team, but it's a major issue. The lack of control, I think it also affected, like, I thought Craig Casey didn't take a chance either. I thought the lack of control from half back in the first half in terms of where Ireland played was poor. They improved when Gibson Park and Crowley came on. Mm-hmm. And Crowley nailed it. It was his he has to start in Twickenham next, based on what we saw. But still, he managed to throw that one in at the end. But Cian, I know you asked Andy Farrell, and he was very quick to defend Jack Crowley. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, but I wasn't asking him necessarily about Jack Crowley's missed kick. And I thought, actually, I know you'll have a bit more sort of on this in sort of the Monday embargoed quotes, but I thought I'll give listeners like a flavor. Like, the question I asked was to Andy Farrell: was his overriding feeling relief that Ireland came away with the win, or frustrated that they actually didn't get the bonus point at the end? But before I could finish the question, Andy Farrell kind of jumped down my throat, which I think gives you a slight indication.
I don't think he necessarily jumped down. No, I don't think so.
I think he got very defensive.
I've seen him jump down people. So
I think he got very defensive, and from what he continued saying in the embargoed section, I think gives you a real insight into probably how difficult he's finding the 10 situation as well, for the reasons that you've outlined. Because I think at the end of it, he will be frustrated that Ireland didn't get a bonus point. Of course he will. Italy are still above Ireland in the table. As crazy as that sounds, and obviously we're watching England at the moment losing to Scotland. And that probably sums up the game. But I thought, like, the ovation that Jack Crowley got when he came on was unbelievable, and I think he fed off the crowd a little bit. And I thought, like, instantly the difference that he made to the shape of Ireland's attack, like in the build-up to Robert Balakoon's try, who Andy Farrell said was one of the best tries that Ireland have scored in his tenure. Crowley was central to that in terms of taking the ball to the line, playing it flat, asking different kinds of questions. He nailed the conversion, he nailed the penalty straight after that, and that puts Ireland 20-10, wasn't it, in front. And then to throw in the clanger at the end was just really disappointing. But I think on the whole, I think the glass is definitely half full for Jack Crowley, and I think he should probably start in Twickenham next week.
Jack Crowley plays like that, it's like the Croke Park performance earlier this season. He's the best 10 in Ireland. That's indisputable. The problem he's had is that since November he hasn't played that well, but he comes on and he affects a game like that, especially on the back of, I thought, a poor performance for Sam Prendergast, who looks low on confidence and looks like he maybe needs to be taken out of the team to some degree. I mean, the game changed, the momentum of the first half changed, partly because Ireland, I think, spent a lot of their energy playing a lot of rugby in the wrong areas. But if you're thinking of a moment, it's a bit of aimless Sam Prendergast chip followed by a missed tackle on Pani that suddenly Italy surged through and they get back into the game on the back of that. And he wasn't the only player to underperform, but I think when this is soap opera around the number 10s is not helping Ireland, and we're talking about it again, but that's because neither of them are really grabbing it. Now, Crowley grabbed it today. If he grabs it in Twickenham, the place where probably he started to lose control of it in 2024, if we think back to that season and that game getting away from Ireland, then it's his for the foreseeable, I think. But it's still not settled, and I think as long as it's not settled, it's undermining this team's ability to kick on and get back anywhere close to where they were at their best. It's not the only issue by a long way. The scrum was second time in 2 games. Ireland have been absolutely monstered at the scrum, and this time it wasn't the Springboks. It was a good scrummaging Italian side, but that's a real concern. I've never seen.
And even when Tadhg Furlong came on,
a long time since I've seen Tadhg Furlong given his wings. Like, it was like he had 10 cans of Red Bull and he was up flying in the air. It was only when a dog boat came on. At that stage, they'd taken off Joe McCarthy and they James Ryan and Tadhg Byrne behind the front row. And then a dog boat comes on, and the 28 or 138 kilos worth of a dog boat, 127 made some difference to that
came
scrum.
On just before that scrum.
So that's a positive. But how do you get the balance right of that scrum between your line-out and your scrum? Line-out went pretty well. Chuka was very good. There were positive elements, but they're bits and pieces. Like, in terms of the overall team performance, there were moments where they were very good, but there was a lot of moments where they were very bad.
The only surprise was that Andy Farrell didn't describe their performance as clunky, because I know that's a bit of Andy Farrell bingo, but I thought that was the definition of a clunky performance. Because if we go right back to the very start of the game, both wingers, James Lowe, who I thought was excellent,
very
and
good.
It really showed the value of getting a kick in the ass, because he came back in and he was brilliant. I thought he was one of Ireland's better players. But himself and Robert Balakoon, who was also exceptional, talk about him a little bit more. I was really frustrated that Ireland didn't get him on the ball more, because every time he was on it, he looked like he was going to make something happen. But anyway, they both won aerial battles in the first 2 minutes, and you're kind of thinking, okay, there's the aerial stuff is not sorted, but a great start. Joe McCarthy had a couple of huge carries. James Ryan had a massive carry. Okay,
the intent was there.
The intent is there. There was offloads being thrown, and like, you can only throw offloads really when you win the collisions, and Ireland were doing that. And you were kind of thinking the tone has been set here for what's to come. They get their try, but not after Dan Sheehan got penalised for the 5 metre tap, which I thought was a bit silly, actually, because I know he scored off it from the Lions, but I'm not sure even it should have been allowed back then for the Lions in terms of diving. So you think, like, he got away with it once. I think it was a little silly to do it again. And Italy looked like they were completely prepared. And I think, just as a side point to that, I thought by and large Holly Davison had a very good game, and it was a spot on call.
And we'll talk about that yellow to Craig Casey.
Yeah, of course, and that was more the bunker official, I think. But it looked like Ireland were in the groove, and you're kind of thinking, okay, we've seen this movie before in terms of Italy coming to town. And then they won a scrum penalty after about, I think it was 20 minutes, and from there it kind of got flipped on its head in terms of the momentum. And again,
that got into their head.
And I thought they were exceptional. I know Ireland were missing players, but like Italy were missing, like, Nacho Brex, and it was Leandro Marin played in the centre.
Marin,
didn't quite have the same impact that I think a Brex would have given you. Menincello in the back three, so they were missing a couple of their best guys as well.
Yeah, Capozzo would be one who, in that kind of end game, if when Ireland were kicking long and on, if Capozzo had been out there and he's running back at you, that's a different picture. Look, Ireland are missing 8, 9, 10 players. I'd say 5 or 6 would be kind of in that 23 at least. And I think that's exposing players like long term. Andy Farrell, it's very notable that he's now talking about experience. This is a great experience for us. There's been a change of emphasis, and I think that's kind of fair enough because of where the team is at. And look, if we arrive into next year's Six Nations with a much stronger Ireland team, with Cormac Izuchukwu pushing Ryan Baird, with Robert Balakoon suddenly the player that we always thought he might be, with 2 out halves who've learned from all these experiences and are a year older, a year wiser. Jamie Osborne, I thought it was excellent today. Stuart McCluskey suddenly become the best player in Ireland at 33, and it's just a pity maybe they didn't give him a chance a little bit earlier. In fairness, the 2 players he was up against were both playing very well. There is definitely scope for this to turn and for it to be for them to become a great team. And we'll look back at the Six Nations as a kind of a big transitional one. A dogboat could come into the mix. Timoney, even though he's 30, 31, he'll still be quite young at the World Cup. There are players who are kind of getting chances and taking those chances. But what I want to see is, I think it was before Chicago, Paul O'Connell said, I want to see, we're not as consistent as we used to be. And I think it's consistency within games as well as consistency week to week. The performance against South Africa was obviously a weird game, but Paris was a very different game. Today was a completely different game, and a completely different Ireland strategy and performance. What they went for was different. They went from being like a really kick-heavy team in the rain to a power-running team from their own 22 in the dry. And I just went back to that kind of Ron O'Gara clip on or his comment on during the Scotland game early on, where Andrew Cotter, the commentator, said that's Scotland are feeling their way into the game, and Ronan O'Gara said they've just wasted 2 minutes worth of energy running from side to side. There was a lot of that from Ireland today, a lot of running into brick walls, a lot of keeping the ball for the sake of keeping the ball, box kicking on the edge of your own 22. Ireland have never played rugby in their own half, really. They've always kicked long and on, tried to turn the team over, and then played when they're in the opposition half. They almost were so focused on intent today that they forgot the strategy.
But that seems to be a theme, like even compared to last week, they were so intent on the scrum and the line-up that they almost let other parts of their game down.
Yeah, and they picked
too many things to fix.
They picked a team to run over Italy, and they did that in the opening stages. And I wonder, did even subconsciously a bit, like, even though Andy Farrell warned that this was the best Italian team to come to Dublin, I wonder subconsciously, because these Ireland players have beaten them so often, particularly at home. I know last year in Rome they really struggled. Did they think that this is going to be enough just to run over them? And to be fair, Italy met that challenge head on. Like the improvements, I know we've spoken about the scrum, but the improvements that their pack in general have made has been remarkable, really. And I know, like, obviously we've got an Irish focus here for this chat, but it's brilliant for the Six Nations that Italy are now like a really good competitive team.
But I still would like to see what France and England do against them, and how well they hold up against those two power teams. I know, just check the score, England's not going well, so it's not like England are looking like an kind of unstoppable by any means, but I think they have, I wonder about how Ireland have started playing down to teams level. Like, these performances are not a surprise. Anyone who's watched provincial rugby this year, this is Leinster's season. Like, the bulk supplier have been, they go to Bayonne, they get in a scrap. They go to Leicester, they get in a scrap. They get in a scrap with everyone. They don't rise above any opponent. They're getting dragged, apart from Connacht. Connacht are the only team they've rolled over all year. They've been kind of getting in scraps left, right and centre. Munster have been pretty awful, certainly since the November internationals. Connacht are having a terrible season. They had no players in the squad, and the only players who were really hitting top form are the Ulster lads who are all enjoying themselves and having a good time. And like,
it was a good day for Ulster.
It was a great day for Ulster. Like, send more down. Get them all in. Like, absolutely. Like, if you're in form and you're playing well and you're in a team that's confident, there's a lot to be said for that. And for so long, that was part of the Leinster thing. Yeah. But right now, the Leinster players, it just looks like Caelan Dars. Farrell has praised them to the high heavens in there. It just looks like hard work. Dan Sheehan, it just looks like everything is hard work. I personally would put John Sheehan on the bench for Twickenham next week, because I think
I would have gone for Ronan Kelleher today, to be honest with you.
He was good.
I thought he was really good off the bench.
I think you made a good point there, Rod, and we made it in Paris last week as well, in terms of the bigger picture. Because if you're to look at the trends at the moment in terms of Ireland, it's on a downward trend, and no one can argue with that.
It's disingenuous. That is disingenuous.
Despite John Fogarty during the week, of course. Again, that was my question. I seem to be rattling them. But if you're to look at the trends in isolation, like, Ireland are on a downward trend. But to go back to your point that we made last week, I think that if there's a bit of pain to be had today, and they avoided the pain, let's give them credit for that, because, like I said, the victory was there for Italy had they been a little bit more accurate at certain times. But the fact Ireland came through it, if there's a little bit of pain to go through this year and potentially in the summer as well, but that, I'd go one further, not just next year's Six Nations, but by the time the World Cup comes around, that all those guys who you mentioned there, Rod, are genuine contenders to start in the 15 or to be in the bench, then I think most supporters would be happy with that. But obviously, we can't predict what's going to happen in the future, and I think that's why Farrell is leaning on this is a good experience for us, because he's probably now thinking bigger picture as well. And like, at the start of Six Nations, no one was predicting that Ireland are going to win the Six Nations. I think most people had probably said, look, they're probably the third best team, and they're on track for that at the moment. Obviously, again, England are struggling against Scotland. Like I had said last week, don't rule out the potential for Ireland to win in Twickenham. Yeah. Now, that was sort of under the premise that, there was going to be sort of a confidence-boosting performance and win here tonight. And I don't think we got that. But I still wouldn't rule out, a big performance, because it's been so long since we've seen it.
Yeah. We go just on the Robert Balakoon, that try that time. I mean, that was definitely like the moment of the game, the defining moment. And obviously they just had a try ruled off just a few minutes before that Louis Linus try. Then they bring on the substitutions, like Crowley comes on, Ronan Kelleher comes on. I mean, it literally just clicked like that, didn't it?
Gibson Park was instrumental as well. I thought both tries, to give them their credit. Both tries. I know Jack Honan scored a try in the middle, but the two kind of phase they were like, that was Ireland.
Yeah.
That was Andy Farrell's Ireland at work, and it's just that we only see it in very brief flourishes now compared to what we used to see. But they were reminders of what this team can do when we're actually clicking. And Prendergast was obviously on the pitch for the first one, and it was Crowley on the pitch for the second one. And Crowley, like, he came in, he looked authoritative, he looked confident, he had conviction in every decision that he made. His passing was crisp. The players around them, like, that's one of the criticisms I think that Ireland have of Crowley, is that, you know, the team lose shape through phases when he's on the pitch compared to that was the opposite. It was if he grabs ownership in the way that he did in that 2-minute spell, and it wasn't just 2 minutes, but in that 2 minutes in particular, that's it. Like, that's why we got excited about Jack Crowley when he first came onto the scene. And he almost needs to watch that back over and over again to go, this is what I can do.
Whatever was said to him before that game, he just needs to keep replaying, because he was, as you say, the Leinster game was the last time he really looked like that, wasn't it?
And everyone else looked like vibrant and on the front foot as a result, and the ruck speed was much better because they were asking questions and shifting the point of attack, and the Italians were second guessing themselves, so suddenly it was Ireland winning collisions, and for 2 or 3 minutes it just looked like a different team, and it flowed. My frustration with it is that on the back of scoring that try, kicking the conversion and kicking the penalty, with 20 minutes to go, Ireland were 20 points to 10 up, and against Italy you would expect them, even though this is a better Italy team, to kick on and go 27, maybe 34, and you leave with a good scoreline and a last quarter, but they don't do that anymore. And Crowley, I guess, has to take some responsibility for that. But to be honest, it was others. You know, it was ill discipline. It was a scrum going backwards. The team never really got control of it, and it was too brief. But during that period, it was definitely even the Stuart McCluskey. What are you saying?
No, Aaron Rodgers is his name.
Yeah, they're calling him Aaron Rodgers. Like that piece of ingenuity, that bit of just creative thinking on the pitch and improvising what you're doing.
I think on that and how good the shape looked for those, like, instantly when Crowley comes on, I think it really helps when you have a 10, and look, this will hopefully come in Sam Prendergast's game, but have the triple threat of the run, kick and pass. And I don't think defenders are expecting Sam Prendergast to take them on in contact when he does it, but Crowley will do that, and I think it spread a little bit of panic into the Italian defence, because they were like, okay, what's this guy going to do? He got absolutely hammered in a tackle because he delayed the pass so much to the last second, where it looked like he might go through a gap. So I think that had a big impact in terms of putting the shape on the defence. But it was so pleasing to see that try, or the Robert Balakoon try, and also the Jamie Osborne try, which Stuart McCloskey set up from the offload as well, because, you know, and it's something we were talking about yesterday, Sinead, in terms of what does Ireland's game plan and tactics look like going forward. I think a lot of people were worried last week because it was so kick heavy in Paris, but I think that was more tailored to the conditions in terms of being a wet night in Paris and the opposition, whereas I think we saw tonight Ireland still have the ability to go through multi-phases. I'm not sure how many phases it was for Balakoon's try, but it was 9 for Jamie Osborne's, and it was the slickness of passing at the line. Thomas Clarkson made a brilliant carry just before Stuart McCloskey threw the offload for Osborne in the build-up to that try. So it's really pleasing that, you know, that's still in their locker. I think it's about adding layers to that, and also adopting the kicking game, which we know is going to be really crucial, and having seen the back three and the wingers in particular winning so many aerial balls, like, that was hugely encouraging as well.
I just don't understand, like, one of the best things Prendergast did today, and there was good in his game, it's not all bad, but Ireland won a scrum free kick and he put up a spiral bomb that caused absolute carnage in the Italian backfield. I don't understand why they just completely went away from the kicking game today. They've never been a team that didn't kick, and I think it caused them all sorts of bother. I don't think. Sorry, just
to go back to my point that they thought they could just run. They could run from deep.
But they've never been able, even at their height, they never were able to run over teams. Like in the New Zealand series, they kicked long and on all the time. They played smart, strategic rugby. They put themselves in the right area, and then they struck. Like, the idea that you're not able to. You've got it. Like, Prendergast has a brilliant kicking game. Put, like, those spiral bombs, they nearly worked in Paris a couple of times. Mix it up, like, change the picture for Italy, because Italy adapted to what Ireland were doing and then became comfortable with it. And even then they didn't. Like, strategically within the game, your halfback should realise that the energy of the team is waning, and then you start kicking. You've got two unbelievable left-footed kickers in Osborne and James Lowe, who both have really good ability to relieve the pressure. Like, you can get the ball off the pitch, you know, you can trust your maul, you've got Izuchuku, who's able to cause carnage out of the touch. I just thought their game management was really, really off today. And I think...
Is that feeding into the leadership deficit thing that you wrote about this morning as well?
Yeah, I think...
Somebody's not going...
I think there's a lot... Like Johnny said, they relied on Sexton for this for so long. And he was because he was the captain, but he was also the key strategic figure within the team in terms of decision-making and where they played. And he had a great feel for the game. He'd been doing it for so long. And I know the people, I'm sure, are going to be saying, "What, they're talking about Sexton again." But like, if you rely on one figure for those standards for so long, and he's gone, it's definitely seeping away. And maybe when you take out Gibson Park, who's who's been around the block and has become very good in that area as well, you lose that kind of element. And for all that Casey has great attributes, I don't think he took his chance at all today, and I don't think he kind of stamped his control over that part of it. Now it's on Prendergast as well, who generally I think is quite good at that, mixing up the decision making and clearing your lines when it's on. But like the amount of times they were running like into brick walls in their own half, I was just like, why are you expending so much energy? That was a big part of why they ran aground midway through the first half, and why they found themselves behind, and why Italy got momentum in the game, and they started making bad decisions because they were fatigued.
Tired,
I think Prendergast will be really frustrated as well about the missed kicks. I mean, he just didn't seem to strike them well. And like, if you're having a bad, like every player has a bad day, but if you're nailing your kicks, it can kind of paper over the cracks, but it can get you, give you a bit of leeway, but
also a bit of confidence.
Yeah, exactly. And to miss those kicks, I think both of you said that he just looks like he's playing with a lack of confidence. And is international rugby, the Six Nations, the place to be trying to build your confidence? I'm not so sure. I just think that you got to, and again, this goes back to Crowley not necessarily putting enough pressure on him over the last while. But I think Andy Farrell has a big decision to make now for Twickenham next week.
In terms of what? Who's on the bench?
No, in terms of the 10 selection. Because
I assume it's Crowley.
But everything you've seen,
he was so complimentary about Crowley, as complimentary as I've heard him.
But
he
everything
was outstanding
we've seen
tonight.
up to now, suggests that Prendergast is Andy Farrell's man, that he wants to give him the game time. But I just don't see how you couldn't give Jack Crowley the start next week. I'm only trying to put myself in Andy Farrell's head.
It has to be consistent across the board. Players played poorly in Paris. Largely, they cost them their place. Josh van der Fleer, 2022 World Player of the Year, gone out of the team. Sorry, 2023 was it?
22. Yeah.
22 World Player of the Year, out of the matchday squad, and he might not get back in for Twickenham. If that's the way he's operating, and you see the benefit of what's happened there in terms of like players responding, players taking their chance. By and large, not everyone did, but like most of the players that come into the team today took their opportunity. Jack Conan, one missed tackle aside, had a really good game.
Was that in the lead up to
the try that wasn't.
I was thinking
he was. But generally, I think he had a positive impact on the game.
Yeah.
So if you're being true to your squad and you're saying to them, if you deliver, I'll back you, I think he has to go with Crowley. I'd like to know how Harry Byrne's been training as well. Like, if Harry Byrne's been training well, and then there's a case for him to be on the bench ahead of Prendergast. I also think there's a case for Neil. I always call Nathan Doak Neil Doak. For Nathan Doak to be in there, because he's probably the best goal kicker in the squad. So if there's a problem with the goal kicking, which there has been for Jack Crowley across the season, and also I don't think Casey did himself any favours today. So I probably not a debut away in Twickenham, but like, everything I see from Doak this season, and as I say, the more Ulstermen the merrier at the moment. He's in good form, but he's also a really, really good goal kicker. So,
exactly.
And if we're in an experimental Six Nations, and we're all about experience and learning, well, then we got to find out about people. The only thing is, I guess there's a Triple Crown now to be played for, and that's where you refocus your goals now, and you go, let's beat the two Celts in England, and have something to celebrate here against Scotland on the final day. Not that that's going to be in any way a foregone conclusion after what they're pulling off over in Murrayfield today. Yeah,
just on the Harry Byrne thing, I think it's interesting. It's come to my head now that you've mentioned it. Andy Farrell spent so much in November bigging him up, and now he's in the squad. You haven't really heard too many mentions of him.
No,
I've missed him. So back to your point about how he's training, maybe he's not tearing up trees in training, because Andy Farrell was clearly keen to get him into the squad.
I get a sense he might come in for the, because there's such a split now, first 3 games, second. I think he might, I always kind of thought he might come in for the second 2 games, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
or he needs to get some bench time.
I think he sees the two, like Jack Crowley and Sam Prendergast, as his main 2 guys. But what happens if one of them was to get injured, before a World Cup? quarter final, round of 16 next year, and Harry Byrne doesn't have enough game time in the seat, so they need to be careful in terms of managing that too.
Like Byrne's been good starting, like he has been great, but he's been getting games, like he's obviously training well in Leinster because they're picking him ahead of Prendergast for big games, and actually they played quite well together. So maybe Prendergast coming off the bench with that little bit of pressure off, having seen the game, like for an out half to watch the game for 60 minutes, that helps. Like Jack Crowley has seen where the space is, so he comes on and he has a really good idea of, and that gives him some good knowledge coming in. I thought they played well together last week when they came on, but I do think that the hierarchy should change, because I think you got to reward form, and you got to send a few messages as well that like nobody's place is sacred in this team.
And I said it worked with Lowe today,
absolutely, and but like I do think there was some good in it. I thought Jamie Osborne was excellent.
Very solid,
one knock on aside, but I mean everyone's entitled to make a mistake.
His left boot is such an option. And Ireland won that scrum under their own post, and he cannoned it downfield to the halfway line. Unbelievable to have that option in your backfield.
I thought it was Gary Ringrose' best performance of the season. Quietly, like it wasn't anything exceptional, but there was, apart from one defensive read, as we say, there's one.
There's always one.
He made one savage tackle when he haired off the line, but he knocked it on, which was a little unfortunate, but it was a really important tackle.
But he also a couple of lovely subtle touches in attack. We saw maybe it was just that one break in the second half last week where it was like, we haven't seen Gary Ringrose do that for a long time. Maybe his confidence is about, like he's had a very disjointed post-line season, so that's a positive. And playing outside McCluskey, he looks like a lot of fun right now because he's creating opportunities for everyone. He's playing really, really well. Izuchukwu was excellent.
Big responsibility in the line-out for him.
Absolutely, and he took it. He took it. I mean, they've been wanting to get him and Balogun into the team for a long time, and I know Balogun's been out of the squad, but the injuries have really held him back.
And he got that steal as well.
Got to see one penalty. He did cough up the penalty that led to Garbisi kicking the 3 points. Might have been a bit harsh, but he did look like he touched the Italian player in the air at the line-out. But I thought he was very good as well.
Can we talk about Craig Casey?
Go for it. Oh, the yellow?
The yellow. I thought Holly Davison had an excellent game. I thought the communication with the teams was really, really good. We had ref mics, and it was about as clear and as precise. She seemed to know all the players' names. Maybe it's because she's a URC ref, she's used to them. But I thought she was really, really excellent. I think the laws have left the referees in an awfully difficult position when it comes to these kind of incidents. It reminded me a little bit of Ty Burns' red card in Chicago. I thought Craig Casey, someone said it in there, and I'm sorry, I was stealing their line. It's like a fella crossing the road getting hit by the car, and you blame the fella who's crossing the road. Like he's standing there observing someone else make a tackle, and Lorenzo Canone headbutts him. Like there's no burden of responsibility on the ball carrier at all to protect himself or his opponent. He's standing up straight, but he's not ready for the tackle. He's kind of I just don't understand how that's seen as his foul play. I think it's at worst a rugby incident. I would look at the ball carrier and think it's dangerous play by Canone. I certainly think if you have to punish the guy who's upright in terms of the tackle, even though he hasn't instigated the tackle even, it's a penalty only, and certainly it's not a yellow that gets reviewed. And then they're talking about high degree of danger. Well, the high degree of danger came from the ball carrier.
That rubbed salt into the wounds, and that's when Sinead, I said earlier, like that was on the bunker official. That was the language that they used, but because he was going backwards. I think the law is an ass in this instance, because if you're to go by the letter of the law, he was upright in the tackle, but there has to be a feel for the game. And I think like Holly Davison was left in a tricky position, but to hear that like over the loudspeaker, which is what they do now obviously when they're reviewing the bunker official, you could hear the groan from the crowd, because I think people who love the rugby and watch the rugby are just struggling to get their heads around
a bit of common sense.
And the laws don't seem to leave like any scope for common sense. Like you said, a rugby incident, like Craig Casey might have broken his nose there, and through no fault of his own, apart from getting out of the way.
People say he should get lower, but he's not, like, unless he's walking around in a crouch position at all times. He's low enough, but like if he's like, are you saying he needs to be bent at the knees at all times? Like he's not. There's already a tackle happening in front of him. There's a sudden change of angle. He's almost sweeping in behind, and suddenly he's required to tackle. He can't change his body height that quickly. It's not realistic to expect him to do it. Fair enough. Not even fair enough. If it's a penalty, it's a penalty. But the idea that it was both a high degree of danger, but also he was going backwards, just doesn't make sense. And I do think, and like people will say, the Irish are giving out about a decision against Ireland. I've been consistent on this for a couple of years. I think Ian Madigan's spoken about this a fair bit as well. there has to be some burden of responsibility on the ball carrier.
Yeah.
Because ball carriers are leading with their heads and they're going looking for these penalties. And like Kennone had no regard for what Craig Casey and what he did. I think that there has to be. I don't know how you do it. I'm not a laws expert, but you got to find a way that dangerous play can't just come from the tackler. That was, to me, a dangerous carry. Now, some people say that's soft for me to say that carriers are just looking to win collisions, but he hurled himself headfirst at an opposition player. Probably broke his nose in doing so, and it's the fella whose nose is broken who gets punished. I thought it was a bizarre. If that's the law's an ass, as Keane said.
Can you imagine if like an incident like that decided a World Cup final, a World Cup semi-final? So if they don't look at it now, we could be having it didn't really have a material effect on the game today, apart from poor old Craig Casey.
That doesn't mean to say we shouldn't look at it.
Exactly, yeah. But law's an ass.
Yeah. Anything else from the game then before we move on to
I'd like to just go back to Balogun again.
Man of the match.
Yeah, I thought he was outstanding. And look, you don't need to be a rugby expert to see why Andy Farrell has been so keen to get this guy in the squad. He's just been dogged by injuries over the last few years, but it's his ability to change direction at full tilt. And I'm kind of thinking now on the hop, but at the time watching his try live, it seemed to me, and I'm looking forward to watching it back, that is this how it actually played out. There seemed to be a split second when he caught Stuart McCloskey's quarterback pass, and he kind of ran and looked forward, and I think something just clicked in his head. He's like, actually, I can just go around.
I can
just go around this guy. Do you know what I mean? And that's what you want to see from these guys coming in. Completely, be yourself and back yourself, because that's what he's been doing for Ulster on a weekly basis. And it was just so thrilling to see an Irish player move
even in the
through
first
the gears
quarter,
like that.
when he made that break and he passed out to James Lowe, I was like, oh man, seeing a guy just stretch his legs like that, it's
just brilliant. And you have the opposite then in terms of Lowe, when he made the intercept late on, and he knew straight away that he wasn't going to have to, but he was really smart in how he stuttered his run, and it nearly obviously ended up in Ireland getting a bonus point. But I thought as a back three as the whole, it functioned really well. And if we're talking about, which I know we'll get on to now, in terms of Twickenham, I think Balogun has to be nailed on, as harsh as it might be, and Tommy O'Brien, who hasn't done a whole pile wrong since he's broken into the Ireland team, but last week was a really disappointing performance for him. And obviously the aerial battle is going to be massively important against England next week, and I would imagine it will be the same back three again.
Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't see any reason to change it. I think James Lowe gave a really intelligent performance. There was
powerful as well, wasn't
powerful,
it?
Yeah.
He just had attitude as well.
Intent. I know it's become a bit of a cliche, but he was just full of intent to try and prove a point, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's got a lot going on. There's contracts, up for negotiations at the moment as well. He wants to be an Ireland player for as long as possible, and that on that evidence he can go on. And it's just, again, for so long Andy Farrell stayed loyal to big hitters. That was an advertisement for everyone could do with a dropping sometimes, and no harm in it at all. And I'm hoping Josh van der Fleer will respond in kind. I would go with that back three absolutely. I don't think the lads last week took their chance. I'd probably stick with that back row as well. I thought that I know you're not a huge fan of the Doris at 7 experiment, but I think it gets Ireland's best carriers onto the same pitch. And I don't know if you bring Josh straight back in and you drop Izuchuku, or you drop Jack Conan onto the bench.
I would be very surprised if Tyburn doesn't play 6 next week and possibly Izuchuku on the bench. I think I would probably keep the second row of Joe McCarthy and James Ryan. Joe McCarthy started really well today, came off early again, I thought kind of faded out of the game, which is a bit of a concern because he's been one of Leinster's best players this season since he's come back from injury. But as well as Izuchuku did, Tyburn rarely starts on the bench, and I think going to Twickenham, I think you'd want him in your team. So I think it's just a question of whether he comes in for the second row for either of the locks, or he plays 6 and have Izuchuku off the bench. It's
a bit concerning that so many Ireland players are flagging within games, isn't it? This is supposed to be a system that's built so that they're peaking for this time of year. That's always been the big benefit of the Irish system. John McCarthy was absolutely flat after half an hour in Paris last week when he made that penalty error. He was walking around at that stage, and he's one of the youngest, most powerful, fittest players in the squad. Maybe it's that 11-week block of games that they've just gone through. Leinster again, they've been in one battle after another, so maybe that's taken a toll on them. But it's worrying that Italy looked a fitter, stronger, better coached at times team within that game, strategically stronger. I think if you put Garbisi in the Ireland team, Ireland would have won that game comfortably, because I thought he had a really good game, kicked his goals. But I thought they also looked top of the ground, a bit more powerful, a bit more. Maybe it's, I don't know. I know Jack Conan laughed off the Lions hangover this week, but there's definitely a bit of that going around as well. I think there's no harm starting Kelleher next week and putting Sheehan on the bench.
I think they've decisions to make. I think across the front row. Really, I think.
Yeah, I think Furlong has to start.
Furlong has to start. I would be very much in favour of having Kelleher, because I think Dan Sheehan can be excellent off the bench. And I think they have a decision to make at Loosehead as well. Like, Jeremy Loughman was excellent in Paris last week in the scrum, but he struggled today, and some of his stuff in the loose was pretty poor, I thought, as well.
Would you start?
Well, that's the question. I'm still shocked that Michael Milne got completely bombed out of the 23. Of all the droppings, that was crazy harsh. But like I said, Tom O'Toole did very well when he came on. Now, again, you hit the nail on the head, Rudd, in terms of that was an Italian scrum, not exactly a box scrum. The English scrum is obviously going to be far better. Would you trust a guy who plays tight head week in, week out? It would be a massive call, but I think of what you saw off the bench, possibly. But then do you back Loughman and say, look, you delivered in Paris at the scrum, do it again? But I think you'd like to see a little bit more from him in the loose as well in terms of his handling.
The thing is, the chariot has crashed.
So Scotland have beaten England 31 points to 20, and there was I thinking everybody was just roadkill before that Grand Slam shootout in Paris.
Steve Borth will have to tell the fans to cancel the tickets now for the Grand Slam showdown. This is the point I was making in Paris last week in terms of England are cock a hoop at the moment. Now, this result tonight could be actually a bad thing for Ireland in terms of a response coming in Twickenham, but England, clearly now we have proof we're not as good as they, and I think a lot of their pundits thought as well.
And we know that these things can shift quickly, because 2 years ago we went to Twickenham and was it Jamie Heaslip went on the BBC and said that England have a hope, and everyone was like, Ireland were miles ahead, and Ireland were going to win the Grand Slam, and England came out with an unbelievable game plan, completely tailored to play to Ireland, take out Ireland's strength, and deservedly knocked Ireland off their perch and off kilter, and kind of started this
that was the start
overall
of it, really,
decline. So everyone going into this weekend thought that England were on this trajectory and Ireland were on this trajectory. Maybe Ireland have bottomed out a little bit. England have obviously hit some form of buffers in terms of the Scots bouncing back up in Murrayfield, and it changes the paradigm completely this week, because England no longer have momentum going into this game. They've got questions to answer. Their media is going to be on their back all week. They're looking for a response. So it completely changes the paradigm, and I know we'll have lots of time to talk about it during the week, but it's fascinating. It's completely shifted the narrative.
So Ireland are the foreign team going to Twickenham, is that what you're telling me?
Oh yeah.
1 win after England's 12.
That is definitely the conclusion everyone will reach having watched this video.
12 game winning run comes to an end. Ireland beat Italy, and they're the foreign team going to Twickenham. But I've been consistently saying it, don't rule out Ireland pulling off an upset, but if they are to do it, they'll need massive improvements across the board.
Anything else?
I think we should probably finish. Keane's done it a bit, but Italy were exceptional today, and it's great for the Six Nations that they're that was a way better occasion and match than
loads of fans here as well.
36 nil is no crack to cover and talk about. We've way more to talk about because Italy came to the party, and long may it last. Unfortunately we've lost Wales at the time that we've gained Italy as a competitive force. Imagine Wales were still as good as they used to be.
That could be Ireland's toughest home game in the Six Nations.
I think Scotland might have something to say about
Scotland
after.
But if that's that's good. That's good for the tournament. It's good for those Ireland players. Edwin Adogbo came into a game where Ireland weren't 36-0 up, and he had to go and scrummage for under his own post for his life. That's way more valuable.
Does he
experience.
keep his place on the bench next week?
I would. I think the difference he made, and if we're all about experiences, if this is a Six Nations about experience, then he is one absolutely who you have to get into this Ireland 23. He is too good and too big and too unique as a character.
He's just too big. You have to just play
with him and Joe McCarthy. Suddenly you've got competition with Joe McCarthy. You've got the chance to rotate them. He's a different player, but he's exceptional in terms of the gifts that he brings to the Ireland squad. He's got a completely different profile to all the other players. I'd absolutely keep him in there.
You need the power going to Twickenham as well, and hopefully you maybe see him for a little longer than 10 minutes than he got tonight. I thought he was very unlucky for a couple of potential steals as well. His ability to put himself in the jackal position for such a tall guy and 127 kg is remarkable, really. And I know Andy Farrell touching it there, but it's a brilliant story for the people of Cove and Cove Pirates and the club. I thought it was a great day for club rugby in terms of Robert Balakoon, Enniskillen, Tullamore, for Cormac Izuchuku. But it's a great story because his career was hanging in the balance, which was the 3 Achilles injuries that he had at such a young age in terms of Edwin Adogbo. So for him to finally earn an Ireland cap at the age of 23. I think it probably would have happened a little sooner had he not been injured so often. It's just a great story, and it's a brilliant story, like I said, for the people of Cove, because now they have a new superstar that they can look up to, and this is something that Irish rugby needs to do. It needs to get out more into those kind of places and get those unheralded gems, because like you wrote the piece during the week, Sinead, like Adogbo was more of a tennis player growing up, which is kind of hard to believe. Imagine being on the end serve. How fast would his serve be, I wonder. But you know what, he could easily have been lost to rugby. You know what I mean? Like, so these are the fine balances that Irish rugby needs to do more out of, and get into the community more across the country and tap into these places.
And the new Irish community as well. I mean, it's the most
brilliant,
diverse team that we've seen Ireland put out, in terms certainly of, like, you know, Robert Balakoon's late fathers from Senegal, Adogbo is a Chukwu, both have Nigerian heritage, you know, from different parts of the country. I absolutely, like, that is the, like, it's representative of the whole country, and that's a massive criticism when it was like 13 Leinster players plus a couple of Kiwis. Like, that was a massive criticism of Ireland, and there's still a lot of Leinster players, but it's just it's a broader mix, it's a broader, you know, athletic mix as well. You've got different types of player, different size of men that are coming into the team, and it's the way the RFU should be going. It's not happening quick enough. It's still very schools dependent, much more bigger picture stuff, but it's great to see, and I think people will buy the roar when Edmund Adogbo came onto the pitch today was lovely. It was lovely. The other roar when Jack Crowley came in, I'm not sure Andy Farrell was as impressed by that one, because I'm not sure he agrees that it was a kind of a Crowley in, Prendergast out kind of cheer, but that kind of sums up the great debate that we're all living through at the moment.
So an Inform Ireland, the form team going to Twickenham next week.
The chariot is shaking.
Oh my goodness. Okay guys, thanks a million for that. As ever, this episode was sponsored by Energia. Plenty more reaction and build up, of course, to that England game on the Indo Sport and Left Wing podcast. But that's it for now. Thanks for listening.